just turn it over to Lisa. Thank you very much. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Thank you. All right, eat, sleep, breathe mobile apps. I don't know. Although with that said, I am asked just about everywhere we go and often for strategy ideas. It's less likely that people, well, I shouldn't say that, when they're ready, when they have an idea and they come to us to build it. But I have a lot of people who ask me, I've been wanting to build an app for whatever the business is. Can you brainstorm and help us come up with ideas? So both on the idea generation side as well as on the development side. So, and Amadeus Consulting has been around for, I don't know, we're on our 18th year. So we haven't always done mobile apps. Mobile apps have been around actually quite longer than everybody recognizes, but we've been doing tablet, websites, back-end applications, all software development, custom software development. We don't own any of the things that we build, our customers do. So we're the behind the scenes on a lot of various companies, and a big one that's coming soon to Boulder that's already in Denver is B-Cycle. So if you are down in Denver or have seen the Denver B-Cycle, the bike sharing program, we're the technology company behind that. So there's a mobile app, there's a web app, there's a back-end app, there's a kiosk, there's all crazy stuff like that. So tonight we're going to focus on a mobile app, and you know, I guess I didn't double check with you on time frame because I want to keep everybody's time.
You have to be done before midnight.
Oh, all right. And it looked like an hour and a half. Is it an hour typically what you're doing, or? Normally you go to 8. Okay. So I will do about an hour and a half, and then I would love to hear ideas if you would like to bring them up. And I often think, I'm thrilled to be here again. I have spoken at a couple of different DaVinci Institute types of presentations, and I think that it's really healthy and helpful when you hear critique and criticism and ideas around someone else. So if people are willing to share some ideas, even if you have to mask it, if you're concerned about an NDA or anything like that, if you have to mask your idea so that you can hear and generate some help around those ideas. So Amadeus, like I had said, we've been around since 1994, doing a lot of custom apps and custom development. In the past 2 years, we're being recognized in Colorado as one of the leading companies building mobile apps. Some of the apps we've built range from, as you can see up here, from Giordano's to a soul food app to a banking app. This is Happy State Bank. There's a game, a speed bag game, B-Cycle, and the one over there on the left, Susie Stitches. We were selected and we work with MGM Studios out of California. So the gamut of types of applications. The applications we build run on iPhones, they run on the Android, they run on the BlackBerry, they run on the tablets, they run on the iPad and the Windows 7 phone. We don't have our first one launched, but we have 3 or 4 that are in production on the Windows 7 platform. So that was just a couple of types of apps. But it also gives you a breadth of the different types of apps. So we're not just an iPhone developer, and we're not doing just games, although I wished that we were the Angry Birds developer, right? Interestingly enough, out of all of the apps that we've done and all of the apps on the variety of platforms, the games, the business apps, I'm always shocked at which one had got its return on investment fastest. So the app was, I think it was about a $10,000, $15,000 app. So it was a relatively small app in the app world. And it made its return on investment, even with some promotion, in less than 3 months. It was like 2-point-some months. And the app itself is not a game, and it's not really what you would think of as a business app. In fact, I hardly think anyone in this room even has downloaded it, but it knows its user base really well. It's called Susie Stitches, and it's a cross-stitching app. It's a cross-stitching app. And that cross-stitching app, now it's a 1.5 years old, has made this woman quite a bit of money. And I always love to start with that story because it isn't the typical one that you're going to think of, right? When somebody comes to you with an app, you're like, okay, Susie, her name is Susie, and we're building her this cross-stitch app, and we're like, okay, good luck with that. And I remember when she first priced it, she was, I think her, in fact, I'm not positive, I want to say it was $2.99. I'm like, are you kidding me? $2.99, boy, a 99-cent app is really common. Are you sure? She's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to do, and is making quite a bit of money. Susie Stitches, and it's a cross-stitching app. Very, very simple. It shows you how to do particular stitches. Very simple layout, not a really complicated one, and wildly successful for her. So when you have that idea in your head and you're thinking, I don't know if this is the one that's going to make my business money or me personally money, you would be surprised. I don't guess on which ones are going to be the most successful. The Speed Bag app was on the most downloaded off of the iTunes store, the App Store, boy, for 3 weeks in a row about a year and a half ago. But they're always short-lived, so it was very popular when everyone was downloading it, and its shelf life was relatively limited. So, and that was the Speed Bag, and it literally is just a little speed bag. If you've ever worked out in a gym and have seen a speed bag, and you have to try to get the rhythm of the speed bag going with your finger, and that is the entire app. So, quite a few of the businesses that we do have their apps for free. So everything from the banking application to MGM Studios, because their goal is to be driving consumers to buy their products or to be using their services, and so their apps are often free. And then there's a range of them in between. But I love Susie Stitches, and she's such a wonderful, great woman, and I love that she's wildly successful on her app, because it's not what you would have thought of, right? It's definitely not the same target audience that you would necessarily think of, and yet she's making a lot of money. So, like I said, mobile apps and tablet apps have been around a long time, but obviously the iPhone launch is really what kicked it off. Interestingly enough, there are tons of statistics you can find, and yet there's a lot of conflicting statistics about which market and how many apps and which ones have the penetration and which phones are headed in the right direction. And I think it's twofold. It's because it's relatively new information, and everybody wants the latest information. That tends to be less accurate. The manufacturers and the carriers have their own interest in mind when publishing numbers, and so I think that there's a lot of interesting things that go on with what's out there and what's being said. There's an interesting graph. I was at a presentation last night. It was a different space. It had to do with the human capital, doing a human cloud and mobile app development. So it was related to mobile app, but in a different way. And it talked about new users purchasing phones. And when a new user is purchasing a smartphone, the lion's market share is going to the Android. It's going to the Droid platform. The iPhone platform has stayed steady at about 26%, and the Android market is in the high 30s to 40s. And of course, the Windows 7 with the Nokia announcement. Microsoft is, like always, the last one coming in, and then is projecting a pretty high rate given a short turnaround. So the Android market actually is converting very fast. With that said, the iPhone market, as far as app goes, is the king, and 400,000 plus apps. I want to say it's only 50 to 75. It's not 100,000 on the iPad yet. But the big difference between the Android store, well, other than volume, and the Apple Store is the percentage of free to non-free. So even within those marketplaces, understanding the pricing model is a very important one. On the iPhone, about 70% of them are paid applications. The majority of them, the lion's share, as you'll see on another slide, are the 99-cent ones. But it is interesting how many of them are paid apps. 30% are non-paid. And you can see the numbers here for Android and BlackBerry. BlackBerry still has the largest market share of smartphones, just the fewest number of apps, and definitely a very low conversion rate on new purchases. So it's still considered the businessman phone, so to speak, and we do BlackBerry applications and code on the BlackBerry environment. It is by far the hardest environment to code on and to develop on, therefore the most expensive, and that's because the tool sets are incredibly weak, the developer community is incredibly weak, and so it's incredibly hard to develop on that platform. All right. 9,000 on the Windows Phone 7. So tonight we're going to talk about target audiences, these 5 major factors that, from our perspective, drive successful mobile app. We're going to walk through some of your ideas and hopefully allow you to take away some tips to help you be successful in your mobile app development. And because we have such a long time frame, throughout this, I'm perfectly fine if you'd like me to clarify, if you want to stop on a particular slide and ask some questions, and we will still have enough time near the end. The question was, how's the reuse? So when you code something on one platform, how can you reuse it on another platform, and what's the percentage of reuse? So even across mobile apps, the percentage of reuse is relatively small. The design is reused, which the truth of the matter is the design and your ideas are a big component of it. But the code base itself on the Android and on the iPhone and on the Windows 7 are all non-portable. With that said, there is a new platform coming out that touts a lot of platform portability. We have very limited success with it. We have used it for one application, and it has, unless you have an incredibly simplistic app, it's not fully functional yet. I think in a year it will be, but that won't help you when you want to build an app now. So the code base is not, and the code base to Facebook is slightly different than any of those as well. So it's a lot of different code bases, unfortunately. So you are not saving a lot on your building your next platform or building your next app. You're saving some, though, because some parts of it is the design of it and how are you laying out the screens. But you're recoding. You're recoding and retesting. Now, often when you build an application and you're recoding it, you code it till you get it right. You move things around. Yep, that's exactly right. So on your next app, you got it pretty much right. It's just a matter of duplicating it. So there's some back and forth with the design and the actual application that you're saving, but not really much on the code. So the iPhone, of course, is Objective-C, by the way. Objective-C is a very old language. In fact, I'm calling myself old then, because I have quite a few friends who lived in Chicago working in the trading industry, and the language they used a lot was Objective-C because it came from the Next platform, if anybody remembers that old platform. The language was really smart, really brilliant, except it never really took off on any platform, and they brought it back. So it's back on the platform, which means there's a very limited number of people who actually know the language as a native language. I wouldn't say it's an incredibly difficult language to learn, but it isn't an out-of-the-box language that most people have gone to school for or have learned recently. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. On a Google platform, it's a Java-based environment, but I say Java-based because it's not pure Java. So that's the language that we're coding on the Android platform. On Windows 7, it's actually a Silverlight. It's a .NET platform environment. That one converts to the web pretty easily, but it's also a Silverlight app, which there's limited number of experience, although it is a Microsoft platform and one that you can learn to code on. So a variety of different coding platforms on all of these different Android devices.
Back to the design and coding.
Yeah.
What would you say the percentages of design and coding? I know it probably varies, but.
It varies extremely. But I'll give you some examples. Susie Stitches, the question was, can you share the percentage of how much time it takes in your design phase versus your development phase? And during the design phase on Susie Stitches, she pretty much had 3 screens and she had a vision of what they wanted to look like. And we laid out those screens. We often will do what's called a color comp, a graphics version of what it'll look like in that particular size. She looked at them, she loved them, we coded them. That's about as simple as it was. There's other applications. There's one that we've worked on that helps you with scheduling and with time management and time tracking, and it's a very robust application. Lots of variety of screens, a lot of ways to navigate through it, a lot of different functions you can take. That design effort was easily 50%, and it probably should have been 75% before we even started coding. So it was a significant amount of design time on that one. And it wasn't because it sounds that complicated. It's because the UI on such a small platform and a small screen really, really does matter. And this particular person was very, very particular about their color set and their color suite. And picking colors is a challenge when it's a mobile app, because here's what happens. So Kurt has a mobile app. He's even decided what colors. He's used his laptop. Maybe it was a Mac, maybe it wasn't, right? He's given me the hex colors according to what he can see on his screen, and he hands those to me, and I code those, and they look different on this mobile app. And he's looking at his mobile screen, he's like, you picked the wrong colors, go back and do it, right? And you're going back and forth, because the color scheme actually looks slightly different rendering it on the iPhone than it does on different medias. And so the challenge is that if you're a perfectionist trying to get it exactly right on the majority of the devices, that can take quite a bit of time to play with, because it's not one color. It's the color of the background and the color of the buttons and the color of the buttons when you press them and the color of the text and the color of, there's a lot of colors going on. So it's dependent on how much you're concerned about that and how important that is on your app. I know we're going to talk about budget here, so I do want to move on to budget, because I do want to talk about custom graphics. Custom graphics and out-of-the-box graphics are one of the huge key differentiators on budget. So let's keep going, and if I don't get your question a couple slides into it, then interrupt me and ask me. So budgeting for an app. And we've talked about It truly does matter on the core functionality. The range is anywhere from 10K to 50K. And we even have some applications, and I wouldn't say it's just the mobile applications that are even in the 100K range because they're integrating with websites, they're integrating them with some of the social media networks, and they're doing a lot more integration. There are some that are in that 10K range. We don't do apps for 1K. We're not the type of shop that usually can crank something out for $1,000. And literally, it sometimes will take that long to even get somebody's idea on a piece of paper before we get there. So core functionality matters, and how well thought out your app is and how well you decided what it is that you want to do will dictate that. Core functionality of the app means a couple of different things. It means how many different types of paths and screens you have on your application, but it also really means the integration of it. So let me give you an example. Angry Birds is, and maybe I'm misspeaking, I don't think that there's a database in the back end of Angry Birds. They're sending you images and you're playing on a game. When there's a database of information that you're storing information and putting up on a server and pulling down information from it, then you're building a web service for it. So even though we've built plenty of web services, that makes an application more complicated because you have to know where you're storing data, how you're pulling data down. So what type of apps would need data and pull data down and store data? Well, let's see. What can you think of? What apps do you use that might store data? A spreadsheet, potentially, if you're going up to a server and pulling data down from a server. Banking, definitely. Banking is all over on the server. And your passwords, yes. GPS-based, often, yes. Lots of database-driven things that are weather and map, definitely. We're working on this really cool one that runs on an iPad. iPad apps often get categorized in the mobile app, but they're kind of a mobile app, right? Because you're building them on basically with the same tools and technologies that you went on an iPhone. The other tablets are going to be a little bit different of a technology, but those allow a much bigger screen real estate, and so you can have a much more robust app usually when you have a larger screen real estate. And some of the GPS mapping weather type of data is pretty amazing that you can do on iPads when you have that much screen real estate. Okay. Other types of things that are still apps that you want to think about are things like if you have a business and you're doing any pricing verification, or you're going back to a server and looking to say, can this be bought in a different location? Because you're not storing all that data on your phone, you're storing that data on some server, and you're going to look up that information. Often the amounts of nutritional information in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of push in a lot of healthcare type apps. A lot of that data is often on a database. So when it's on a database, it's not that it's that much harder, but it is harder. It adds complexity to that functionality or to that application, right? Custom graphics. So, boy, I should have slid back to the Happy State Bank. When you see most mobile applications are using standard graphics that are coming from a standard tool set that either Google has or Apple is providing. So when you see a standardized button, the buttons all look about the same, and you could picture it when you're using your mobile apps, the buttons all look about the same. Maybe they're a little sized differently. You can change the font color on them. You can change the color of them, and that's about it. When you use that, the coding of that is simply drag and drop and configure the button. When you're using custom graphics and you're coding custom graphics on the phone application with a touch screen, that means that based on the size, you're doing a lot more coding to know where you press in this spot based on where I have the graphic is when I mean it's a button. The amount of coding that takes is extremely more complicated than dragging a control from a box. So it isn't that it isn't possible, but it increases the cost of your app. So when you're designing your app and you design this gorgeous, we did one for Elon. Oh, I wished I had that one locally. I have a jump drive, maybe I do. You can picture there's an Earth, a globe, right? So it's a sphere, and the sphere actually spins, so I can spin the sphere. And what we did was we took the Earth and we made different pictures out of the Earth. So all of them are curved according to a globe, and it's very, very high-end jewelry. And so you see this gorgeous jewelry, and you can spin the globe, and then you can stop on a picture of this beautiful ring, and you can get to the details of it. And you can go back to this globe. This globe and this spinning graphical effect is amazing and makes it a very, very cool app. Lots of downloads. Lots of people love to just see the app. And it's because they invested a ton of money into that globe and that ability to spin it and stop it and press on any of these images. That was the most expensive part of their app, because really the rest of their app, when you got to a picture of a jewelry, it's a picture of the jewelry with some descriptions and talks about the artist who has designed that piece of jewelry, and you can link to some more artist information, but basically just textual information that you're seeing after this globe. They spent all their money on that globe, not all their money, but on the app side of it, probably 70% of the cost was this amazing globe. But that globe is a differentiator. That globe makes this app a really popular app that people love and that they love to share, and that they say, oh my gosh, you have to see this app, right? Which is what you want of your app. And even if it isn't someone who loves jewelry, they love this app. And so it's a vision that I want to give you when you're talking about that's custom graphics. And they were spending a lot more money to have this really cool custom piece of it. All right? So does that give you an idea of custom versus? The question was, it sounds like the Wild West of the web on the mobile market, which in my conversation last night with human capital, it very much feels that way, right? There's not a lot of people who know how to code. Every time you're building a tool set, then the vendor comes out with a tool set that just replaced the custom thing that took you forever to do. And that is very much happening in the mobile space. With that said, the community of users are helping each other a lot more than I even remembered it back in the web. I think just because people are used to that as a medium to help each other these days, and there's a lot more availability of social networks because there's already the web. With that said, yes and no. I actually just approached the company, so we'll see what they say, because we have another application that, would love to use that globe, and we'll pay them for it, and they hadn't even thought about it. It's a jewelry company that never even thought about the fact that their code would have been an asset. And actually, the truth of the matter is there aren't a lot of marketplaces that make it easy to do that. Probably shareware or freeware I could, but to pay for it. So. We're kind of being a broker, but it actually helps us, right? We don't want to recode this, and it's beautiful, and it could be used again. And we were doing it for a very high-end company who wants to reuse it, not a small little app. And so when they get the visibility of a very large brand who wants to use that, then it's gonna help their brand. It wouldn't hurt their brand, so to speak. So we'll see. They didn't come back with a yes. And I stepped out because it doesn't feel fair to broker when I know like the cost and the prices. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You two are going to broker this between them. So.
Was that a free app?
Yes, it is. It's Elang, E-L-A-N-G, or no, Y-L-A-N-G, Y-L-A-N-G, and it runs on the iPad. I'm only 90% sure the iPhone one is launched. The iPad one is the first one that they launched because they had this gorgeous graphic that they were using. There are a lot less iPad apps, but it makes it a lot easier to find them and to see them. And so there are some customers who are choosing to use that as their primary platform or their starting platform. By far what we see is the iPhone is the starting platform. So most people start with the iPhone, quickly go to the Android. I highly recommend you don't do them at the same time for that reason that I talked about earlier, that you will have learned things when you did it on the iPhone that you can have applied. With that said, there are some people, time to market matters more than if I'm coding it twice on two different platforms. So typically we see iPhone, then Google, then iPad, then BlackBerry is usually the sequence. And Windows 7 now. Windows 7 sometimes is coming in at the same time as Google, as the Android app. Okay? So the budgeting, and here's the thing about it. We get lots of calls every day, as well as I'm guessing quite a few other app development companies, and we do quotes for free. We don't charge people to do a quote. So when you're giving somebody an idea, you should expect them to be able to take your idea and give you a quote on what it's going to take to do the development costs for it. And as long as you're not changing the requirements a lot along the way, which everyone changes the requirements some, but as long as your requirements haven't changed from what you had wanted in the beginning, you can feel pretty confident that you are going to be able to hit whatever that price will be. I will tell you that there are prices that you will get, if you got 5 different quotes, you would have 5 different ranges, and there doesn't seem to be any logic necessarily behind it. I can't always explain why somebody quotes one thing and somebody quotes another. Sometimes it's comfortability with, I've coded something like that before, so this is easy for you or easy for us. Other times it's that there are plenty of people who have no overhead of a business, and they're literally coding in their garage, so to speak, like it was in the Wild West of the web days. So the price ranges do vary a lot.
What's the breakdown between the little guys developing apps and then the big companies? Do you have a sense?
The question is, what's the breakdown between a company, a business app, and an entrepreneur who wants to build an app? It's 50-50. I want to say it's 50-50. I think it has shifted a bit in the last 6 months. It's shifted a bit in the last 6 months, and I think that's the marketplace and Windows 7 phone, and that businesses now are starting to get it. It always takes longer for business to see any real value. I'm in IT, so I guess I can make fun of ourselves, so to speak. I went to a CIO conference. It was over a year ago. And it was CIOs from Fortune 500 companies, very high-level companies, and quite a few of them sat in my booth. And almost every one of the CIOs, there was probably 3 that talked, flowers.com, ones like that, 3 that had clear ideas on how they were using mobile. The other ones basically would sit down and say, what? Oh, my CEO wants a mobile app, and I don't want it, and why do I want it? And no, there should be no mobile. I felt like somebody saying, we shouldn't have games on computers at work because people are going to play games. I mean, it was the old days around, really? You have no idea how a mobile app might help your business, and you think that you're so against it, and what you're coming to me for wasn't to build one, it was to come up with ammunition to tell them why they shouldn't have one? I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is what's going on in our industry. I can't believe that the leaders are actually believing we don't want mobile apps in our business. Now, the reality is it's another platform. It's another platform to maintain. I don't have a developer who knows how to code it. I don't have time to do it. IT budgets have been slashed. I can barely keep us running and keep Exchange up, and you want me to go spend time on a mobile app. Now, I understand that side of the IT stress, but the side of it that isn't understanding or even thinking about how could this help my business and what could be a business app behind it, just needs to spend some time with a creative person who can do some brainstorming, because there are really businesses that are succeeding with building mobile apps. There's no way that Happy State Bank wasn't having a pretty success. They're one of the pioneers in the banking industry and have had an app for about a year and a half. And they didn't convert to the second or third platform until they had quite a bit of traction on their first. And for them, it even had a lot to do with they're seen as a leader. The marketing dollars spent on it, when I look at the marketing dollars that companies spend on a football box and the marketing dollars that they're spending on an iPhone app, right? It's marketing dollars for many of the businesses. And they have to think about it that way. It's not necessarily an IT dollar, it's a marketing dollar for many of them. With that said, I would do a disservice if I said, I'd love to create a marketing app for you, because marketing apps often are not going to be published on the stores. An app has to have some functionality. It can't be just a brochureware. Brochurewares will often be turned down. A question you should ask anybody who's giving you a quote on an app is, how many apps do you have that didn't get put on the store, that weren't accepted? I will say that we have some that weren't accepted the first try, but I'm grateful, knock on wood, that all of them have been accepted that we have submitted. That's a big deal, because the acceptance criteria and the acceptance standard is not a published, let me tell you exactly what it is. So we know some of the rules behind it, but those are protected. Those are proprietary. Those are Apple's decisions on what they accept and what they don't accept. BlackBerry is the black hole, no pun intended, of 3 weeks later, you have no idea if your app's getting submitted, or if somebody got it, you could send an email every day and never hear anything back, and then all of a sudden, your app appeared, or it didn't. So there's a lot of things going on in those industries as far as whether the app actually gets accepted and put up on the store or not.
So what's the average time for an iPhone or an Android app to get accepted?
The average time for an iPhone or an Android app, depends how busy they are, I swear. It's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes there's a couple of things that you have to have. You have to have certifications, and you have to do some technical aspects of your app in order for it to be accepted. So once you're past those hurdles and you have your account and they're synchronized with this application and you're actually just submitting it, could be anywhere from, I don't know that I've seen shorter than 48 hours, to, I think that their published time frame might be 7 days to 10 days. So it's often a lot less than they say, but it could be a week. In BlackBerry, I don't know, and they're not publishing it. It seems to me like sometimes it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and sometimes it's a week. It seems no rhyme or reason. Google is much faster. They don't have the same acceptance criteria that Apple does. So, but again, it's still going to be a short turnaround. So. All right. Sometimes though, and even though we know the rules and even though we try to pay a lot of attention to the rules, sometimes things escape us and somebody else will design their own icon for the app. So the design for your very small icon that's going to be on the store, that's going to have somebody download it, has some rules around it. And there's been some mistakes we've made along the way, like putting a certain image on that app will actually get your app kicked out. So an image that's on your icon on that little, not your splash screen, but just the icon for downloading your app, there's certain things about that image that will make your app not get accepted until you've revised it. If you're lucky, they tell you when they send you back the rejection, what is particularly a matter. 50% of the time we hear that, 50% of the time we're not quite positive what's the matter with it, and we try to get more help, and sometimes you'll get somebody who'll give you back an answer and you'll actually know what it is. So that submission process and what that looks like, sometimes we know what some of the rules are, sometimes we submit it and then we're like, huh, did you guys know that rule? Did I? Who? So we have wiki pages that keep track of the rules that we learned about, but the truth is we can't spend all day on the internet finding all of the rules that everybody has hit, so things just are moving pretty fast. So that definitely happens at times. It's a small tweak or a small change, and then you can resubmit the app. So it doesn't mean that you can't resubmit the app to get approved, but that does happen, and it happens to us.
Can you share some of the common things that you see in the rejection, either on the icon or in the back?
I want to say, boy, I wish I could remember if there was a computer. What are some of the common things that you can do to keep your app from getting accepted? One, if it's not an app. So if it's just brochureware and it has no functionality, we have gotten some of those rejected. And interestingly enough, some of the ones that I kind of thought were apps got rejected, and some of the ones that I thought, I don't know, let's see if they accept it or not, got approved. So I won't say that you can't have any marketing brochureware type of site get approved, because we definitely have had some that have been approved. I have heard Google is going to be 10 times tighter than they were because they have a lot of free apps and not as many paid apps, and their business model is not working so well. And so their free marketplace, which is basically the Wild West marketplace for them, which is fine in some ways and can be frustrating in another. I don't know recently. I know a year ago, if you went to download an Angry Birds app on the, must be a while ago, on the Android marketplace, you would download one and it was just screenshots. It wasn't an app and it was fake. And there's no policing because it's a free marketplace. That wouldn't happen on the Android market, on the Apple marketplace. But on the Apple marketplace, it's really restricted. On the other marketplace, it's not. So, I'm not giving a speech about which one is better. I'm just saying that there's differences in them. So ones that don't have functionality tend to not get accepted on the Apple Store. Ones that have, I want to say, an image of a computer, any type of a computer type of image, they don't like on the button. Text on your icon, an image is fine, but text tends to get kicked back out. I can't tell whether it's always because it's text or just, it's definitely a good stray away from text. When it's this big anyway, it's almost impossible to kind of see. I don't know, I'll try to think of some more before the end of the presentation if I can come up with some.
So I read recently that with the Apple iPhone, there's over 70,000 inactive apps. And of all of them that got approved, some of them have since been deactivated. I'm assuming Apple is doing that. Has that ever happened in one of yours, and you know the reasons?
The question is, what about all the ones that are deactivated, the apps that used to be up on the store? There's a couple of reasons. One, when it's my love-hate relationship. I love that when Apple comes out with a new phone, your operating system is valid for only so many months and then upgrade or it doesn't work anymore. It's great from a software development perspective because you have to maintain so few environments, you test on so few environments. Windows 7 and Google, oh my gosh, you can imagine the testing challenges, and I'm not going to share all the testing secrets because I'm thinking those feel kind of proprietary. It's very hard and very challenging, and we've spent quite a few hours coming up with models that work in order to test across lots of different platforms on those platforms. On the Apple platform, when they come out with a new operating system, I'm amazed how many times somebody could have coded something that doesn't work on the new operating system. And so unless somebody is willing to invest money to make the app work on the new operating system, it may not. It isn't a given that it will. So we have worked with some customers that have come to us and said, oh, we had this developer and they coded us this thing and they're gone, and and it won't work on my new operating system. And you're like, oh, I got bad news for you. You almost have to recode this entire component because the way they coded it doesn't work on the new operating system. That isn't always the case, and most of ours are pretty quick. With that said, you could use something related to a controller, a stack, or memory management is a big deal. Memory management, as you can imagine, is it's like the old days of you don't have a lot and you have to work with it. And speed and performance and memory management is the art of developing some of those mobile apps. And so sometimes it could have been that. Sometimes it's because they're not in business anymore, they're not using the app anymore, and they're pulled back down. I don't know if Apple goes through and contacts people to say how after so many period of time. I'm actually not sure if they force you to say you're still around and that you're still keeping the app up to date. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. We don't have any that have been deactivated by Apple, so to speak. But we have had a couple clients that have come to us on old versions of operating systems. So let's jump into some of the design and some of the things to consider. So number one, I was going to give you 5 key points. What's the main purpose of the application? One of the pitfalls that I see lots of people do is make it like a web application where there's lots of functionality. One idea for this app. One idea, one app. You have 10 brilliant ideas, you probably have 5 apps. I won't say you have 10. I will say you at least have 5. You don't have one, right? Don't try to cram all of those ideas into one app. So what's the one thing your app will do very well? There's a lot of fitness and mapping workouts, and the goal can have a couple of functionality related to your run, but when you take a run and you record that run and you know everything about that run, that's what this app is great at. It sometimes is frustrating to us as consumers because we'd love one app that just did it all for us, but not really, and not really on your mobile app. So your mobile apps have an app that is really good at something. And if it's not easy for somebody to understand what it is good at, they're not going to buy it, they're not going to download it, and then they don't use it. So make sure it's really clear and simple for them to understand what is this one thing it's really good at. A stopwatch app. Games are a little bit different. We won't claim to be the big game developer. We have developed some small animation and some games, but we are not an exclusive game developer. And there are shops that do things like that all of the time. And if the game is what you have in mind, I'd find a true game developer because they're going to know a lot more about that. With that said, there is a focus to this game. There isn't 100 different, there's a lot of different visuals you can do for this game. And if you're not an Angry Birds player and you don't know that some of their model, which is a very interesting one, which of course a very successful one that can be duplicated, is this idea of seasons and this idea of apps have a very, very short shelf life, incredibly short. I wish that I could quote you how long, but it literally changes every month. I can't get a feel on what a game or an app shelf life is. Before, we used to measure it in days. There are apps that now, like Angry Birds, that have bucked the trend and are around for months and months. They might be on years. With that said, one of the reasons that people get excited about after they've played the game and figured it out is because there's all these seasons, and there's these new images, and there's these new Easter egg types of things, right? So when you have an app, think about your shelf life of your app and what's going to keep it fresh, if your goal is to keep it fresh. If your goal is to get another resurgence of marketing energy, another resurgence of a download, there's got to be something that's potentially keeping it fresh. And that was a really creative idea that they're doing that you should emulate, that you should think about. All right? Does everybody understand what I mean by the seasons and the, okay? So, of course, it helps when there's a problem you're solving, but it isn't always a problem you're solving. I truly don't believe that Angry Birds is addressing a problem or probably even a true need per se, although it's amazing how many people are spending time just playing around, just playing with apps when they're on trains, on passengers in cars, on planes, and at lunch, and hopefully not at work, but at a variety of things. So knowing what your app's going to do and creating both when you understand what your business problem is, it will help you place your application, and that's what this slide is telling you, the classification in the App Store, the name of the app, that's going to be really important. And when your app has 3 main ideas or 3 different types of functionalities, you don't get to put it in 3 different classifications and have 3 different names for it. That I've seen rejected. I've seen people try to take one app and do a slightly different version and call it a completely different app, and it got rejected. It was too similar to another app. That was another one that I have seen gotten rejected. So the idea is that singularity is good in a mobile app. All right, pretty basic concept, but one really worth reiterating. The question was if I have 2 different functions or 2 different user bases. Basically, I have 2 different types of users. I have a business user and I have an outdoor user. I have a personal use for it. How can I use the same app and get it published twice? And what you do is you name it something different. You have graphics and a name on it. You have a different icon for it. You change around the functionality a bit because you're going to gear it toward a different user, and then you can resubmit it. So I'm not saying you can't resubmit some of that core functionality, but if you don't make any changes to it, chances are likely that it gets rejected because you're just trying to multiple submit to many places. It's kind of like what would happen with website pages and
Yeah, I mean, that's the
right.
idea, is to multiple submit.
Yeah, it is, but if you're Apple, that doesn't do them, really, they don't want you to do that, right? They don't want to have one app in all 5 categories. It's not really going to serve them well in their mind, so to speak. But it is possible. You just have to make some changes to it.
Okay.
And if you think about it, a business user and the way they're going to use something and a personal use and the way they're going to use something is not exactly the same. And to really have that first page or 2 or 3 and the menus be different would make the app different. Okay? It doesn't have to be completely different. That would make it different. There is another app, and I don't really know with Apple. I hear there's a lot of hearsay, and there's a lot of boards that will claim that they know. When an app is written by a company, it tends to be accepted more often than it's just an individual person. And that's disappointing, and it's not 100% true at all. There are plenty of people who get their apps submitted, but supposedly they're looking at the coding standards and they're looking at your application, and then they're looking to see if it's a company that produced it. So in the very beginning, they weren't because there weren't enough companies. Everybody was just submitting them, but there has been some blacklist types of companies in development and things like that that has happened in the marketplace. So as I'm thinking about other things that I've heard stories around things not getting approved. So you never want to be in the blacklist, right? Think about your target customer. So that was basically what the question was related to, is think about your target customer. I loved this app too. This is Elise Designs, and it's these very high-end gowns. It was a gorgeous app. Real mobile phones when you're in the vertical mode versus being able to go to both modes, which by the way isn't free. It's not free to code something that goes both modes. It's possible to code it to go both modes. So if it's very important for you to go both modes, you have to actually, if your development company doesn't ask you, you have to tell them that that's a requirement of your app. That's not just a give me. There's so many things that everybody just assumes that are give me's, and don't assume that there's anything that's a give me when you're working with a development company. Ask them, is there an extra charge for that? What would that look like to even move your screen from one to the other? The reason it's not a gimme is because there are some things you have to recode in order to get it to work that way. But Elise Designs was this nice long component, and it was just prom dresses. So even though their company had lots of other types of gowns for different things, wedding gowns and evening gowns, this app was a prom dress app. So even in a business application, when you say, well, it's dresses, it's the dresses we sell in our store, this was a great creative way of, this is an app designed for this collection of prom dresses. That doesn't mean that they can't use a very similar app when they want to do a wedding application. But I have to tell you, when you're thinking about high school prom, that page is high school prom. That's not, I'm getting married today, right? So even your splash screen, the colors that you're going to pick, there were the fonts that you use, things like that are geared toward that particular consumer. We are bidding with a very large cosmetic company, and they have lots of different brands, and they have lots of different consumers. And the consumer that is going to be using a very high-end skincare product is a different look and feel of an app of one who's getting ready for a prom day and using different products, different makeup and products for that. And so literally what we've helped them do is identify a app for a particular type of use. So, an app that would help you get ready, a countdown to your big day. This is a fairly male, I think there's 3 women in here, so you're gonna have to, 4, there we go, you have to stretch with me. When women are getting ready for their wedding day, they're preparing for, I swear, most often 9 months to a year ahead of time, and many of them are thinking about skincare products and thinking about all of these things over the next 9 months that are gonna happen when I'm getting ready for getting married. And this entire app is helping them do that with product placements and product ads, and now your countdown is this many days, and this is an app idea, even though at first you wouldn't think about an app like that, right? Because you'd think, well, they're selling makeup, it's probably just a makeup app. No, the trick with an app is be creative in thinking about an app that's gonna sell that product. And it's a creative way of being able to do product placements with colors and knowing a customer. So let's go back to, it's a very singular app, even though it's multiple products, for knowing who their user base is, okay? It's for the bride, not the groom. And it is for a bride who is gonna worry about skincare and makeup and things like that for their big day. So it's not driven for prom, it's not driven for any of those other types of things. The prom, the teenage app that we proposed had a lot more to do with a game. I play a game, and it has to do with, can I guess certain things about if you open any teen magazine, there's always a quiz or a game in any teen magazine, and it was the same thing for them. It was quizzes and games and Ouija board kind of stuff. It's that kind of things that are driving an app to sell the product. So again, your app that you're using to sell your product is just the creative idea to get to people to be thinking and marketing and branding your product. There's ad placements and things like that as well. And on your app, that can be a free app, you can do ad placements. So you can sell ad space, so to speak, that gets pulled up on your app, and if people are clicking on it, then you can get money for selling your app. It's been around for a while. I personally don't know of any of the apps that are making a ton of money on ad placements, but if it has a possibility and there are certain sets of ads that you really think can help drive your particular app, and especially if you were using a free app and trying to make some money that way, it isn't a bad option. It does take up some screen real estate, but that's about it. Golf, obviously. I always say, just because there's an app that does your idea doesn't mean that it's now a bad idea. And everybody knows that in a business model. If anybody believed they had an idea that had never been thought of before, it's possible, but it might not be likely, and that's still okay. It doesn't make your idea bad. It means the way you're going to implement it, there's a market for it, because you can even find how successful some of those apps have been, and then you can prove whether there's a market for it or not. So if there's something out there, there might be a market for it, and now you already know that versus an idea that you've just come up with. Age, gender, whether it's business or leisure. Again, what problem? It doesn't mean a general app is a bad app. Please know that I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it will just be more challenging in order to have a larger user base. Let me tell you that when you're when you're O Magazine, you have a user base and you know what your app's going to be, and it's duplicating a magazine. It didn't even have to be, right? But they already had a brand built. They already had people downloading it. So I think a big difference is when you already have an established brand, when you're Pepsi, when you're an established brand and you have an app, people will download your app just because you have a brand and they want to see what it is. If you are an entrepreneur and you're trying to brand your app, the generalist target audience we tend to not see those as successful. So even though you think large user base, I'm going to have a lot more people download my app, I will remind you of Susie Stitches. Right? And her very specific target audience, and you can still make quite a bit of money when you know your target audience well. Susie. All right. Do your research. Look. What are apps out there? I'm amazed how many people call us saying, first of all, they won't tell us anything without an NDA, and then they tell you your idea, and you're like, there's 15 apps that do that. Like, really? By the time we did NDAs over this, there's 15 apps that do exactly what you've said. We always tell somebody when we know that there's apps that do that. I'm not going to hide it from somebody. Most of the time they'll be like, really? I had no idea. And I think, did you not do a little bit of research? Do your homework, okay? Do your homework and find out what's out there. Okay. Google and Bing, search competitor apps, check Facebook and Twitter, look at the other social activities, see what's going on with those. So it's not just on the App Store. So that's what this slide is telling you, is there's lots of ways to search to see what's going on with apps. All right? Look how long the apps have been live. So we got BlackBerry, Google, Android phone, Windows 7 phone. They hit them all. They hit them all. Oh, that's what the screen is. The Fab 4. iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, and Windows Phone 7. Okay. Anyway, they've developed an iPad application that you're using while you're watching the TV show, but it's your social network platform, really. And what it's enabling you to do is be connected with everybody else who's watching it and be showing you the clips that you're not seeing while there's a commercial playing or while you're fast forwarding it. So it creates this energy around it. It happened during the Oscars as well. There was an app that you could be running, like which dresses were getting the best votes and which one was going to win and things like that. So using an event to create a media around engaging a consumer, believe me, I am sure I don't have that iPad app downloaded when I'm watching Grey's Anatomy. Don't really have TV. So, but if you did, you can imagine some great ad placements, because I want to sell ads on these engaged users who they know who the target market is, who watches Grey's Anatomy. And what great ad placement, because they're interacting with that device and paying a lot of attention to it. And remember, we can do personalization and you know, geographic ties into that. We were working with Microsoft on ad placements when you had your mobile phone and you walk into a baseball game and it tells you, by the way, the beer special is at that booth, and don't forget to pick up your shirt, because right now I gave you a 10% off coupon for your Broncos jersey. That's using geolocation services and ad placements on that mobile phone and selling product. I mean, that I believe in 100 times of successfulness. And I like the TV interaction. I like that interaction when a person's watching a TV show, having something that they're interacting with. I think that that is a huge lion's share of a market to be able to have some real ability to be interacting with your consumer. So those are interesting apps that you can be thinking about. And the reason I share those is because it can spur part of whatever your idea already is into a kind of a different place. So, okay, there's a lot of data on these slides. I'm going to kind of go through them a bit quickly. iPhone, this statistic, I should have quoted, I should have had them quote where this was coming from. 74 million iPhones, there's only 10 million iPads, although huge big push when the new version of the iPad just came out, and huge sales in a day. Even the iPod Touch. So really, the iPad is still winning. By far, the number of people who are coming in are saying, I want an iPhone app as their primary platform or their starting platform. Okay? The Android is right behind. It is gaining market share. When I talked to you about new smartphone purchases, Android is far exceeding what an Apple is, and it's definitely stealing market share from BlackBerry. BlackBerry's market share, by the way, was dying. I thought they were about dead, and then they had a big resurgence, and they're placing a bunch of ads, and part of me wants to see them around and stay. I think that they have some great things in their platform related to security and some of the types of things you can do. And BlackBerry users are diehard BlackBerry users. With that said, the development environment is so challenging and difficult. I'll be happy when Windows 7, there's still 3, and when BlackBerry is one of them from a development standpoint. With that said, Android, 23% of the smartphone market, US market. There's also a lot of statistics where if you're paying attention to the US market versus the international market, it's projected that it will take over iPhones in 2011. We'll see about that. I think that they're going to lose a bit of share to Windows Phone 7, which is the next slide. This is the BlackBerry. So again, BlackBerry users are business users. So business apps that are, most of the time when we see somebody wanting to do it on a BlackBerry app, it's because they're tapping into the business users. And it's still a strong platform. We are still, you know, I might be tough on it, but that's only, you know, you have to look at it both ways. There's also not a lot of people who can do BlackBerry app development. So yay us, we get to do BlackBerry development, app development on BlackBerries. With that said, there are some because there's not a lot of apps, and when you have a winner and it's on a business phone and it's a business application, I would very much look at the BlackBerry platform. And then Windows Phone 7. Oh, they're calling it the Everyman. Obviously, just launching, so 1% of smartphones in that market, but it is rapidly growing. Yes. The question is, if I had to pick only one platform, which one would I pick if it's a 20 to 30-year-old market? How long do you think your shelf life is? Is your shelf life going to be a couple months and you're making a big bang, or is your shelf life going to be long?
I'd say 6 months to 8 months.
And then I think it's, when you said 6 months, and chances are probably likely that it is a relatively short lifespan, I'd probably still say the iPhone. I'd say you'd lose out if you weren't doing it on the iPhone. The number of apps and their success rate is really still very strong. With that said, after 2 months, if you were having wild success with it, I'd just as fast like that do your Google app, because there's no reason not to tap into that huge, fast, ever-growing market. So if I had to pick one before the other, I'd pick the iPhone, and then I'd quickly go to the Android market. But with that said, with this new platform that's coming out, if it's a relatively simplistic app, you could wait a couple months. You might be able to get 2 for 1. You might be able to get both platforms. If it didn't have a lot of web services, if it didn't have a database connectivity, and it was just cool with graphics and some handheld functionality, you might be able to get away with this shared platform.
I'm trying to evaluate what's the smarter platform to sort of beta test on, noting that the Android platform is sort of fast, easy, somewhat unregulated, easier to push something out on, and probably not as finicky on feedback, as opposed to launching an iPhone app. I think you pretty much have to go through the store and there's feedback, so if you got bugs and glitches, you get beat up really quick and you may never recover. Does it make sense to actually prioritize an Android for testing?
Get it right the first time and go Apple. I don't know. I think if the question is simply, it's a valid business argument. The question is simply, if you're going to have a lot of feedback and you want to test something, shouldn't you test it on like the weaker platform before you go strong, basically, is what he's saying. And there's less risk in that, and you're not going to piss off as, excuse me, well, it's like the Oscars, right? What did she say? Didn't she swear or something? You're not going to have a user base that's going to give you a lot of negative feedback and then have that press that you're going to have to combat. Although with that said, the Android market has lots of different devices and lots of different platform problems, so testing is more of a challenge on the Android platform than it is on the iPhone. I really think that it is not that hard to test. It is not that hard to make sure that it's right. Whether you're going to get negative customer feedback, you're going to get negative customer feedback. You're going all in. You're going to build the app. You're going to address the customer feedback as quickly as possible. It isn't because they're buggy. We don't really see that the feedback is because apps are buggy. They might be really hard to use. It might not be useful, but it's not typical. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. The fact that you have a really buggy app, quite frankly, how many hours would it possibly take even for you to have tested it before it launched? I mean, gosh, there's not that many screens. There's not that much functionality to test. It doesn't take weeks to test. You would kill yourself to spend 8 hours testing your app, really. And you could lose connectivity and turn it on and off and do about everything that you possibly could on your app. So the testing and the bugginess, no. Now, if what you're doing is wanting to really nail your UI before you've coded the app and launched the app, using some test market base just to even see screenshots and to say what they like and what they don't like, I'm probably a more believer in that than I am pick the Android app because you might not get great customer feedback. I'd pick the iPhone platform. I really do think I would. You're capitalizing on the iPhone platform today. It doesn't mean that it will be the right choice in 6 months from now, but capitalize on the one that's the winner today, because today is when you're launching your app. Now, if you're not planning on launching your app till a year from now, that's a different story. But if you're trying to launch it as quickly as possible with whatever this idea is, launch it on the one where there's the reason that there's 400,000 apps versus 100,000 apps is because that's the winning platform. Because those users are downloading apps. Because those users are passionate about apps. So that's very much the case. But if you were starting to make money, make it as fast as possible and then go to your Google. It shouldn't take that long. Most apps development time cycle is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. We're not talking about a long development cycle. It's a month, right? And if you've already gotten all that design done, you got another month before you're on your other platform at the most. I mean, it's not a big time frame consideration like it is on big web apps, right? You launch a big website and it could take you 6 months or 9 months when you're launching this huge app. We're talking about a month here.